Inside a dusty factory line, a rotating drum keeps spinning. One moment of contact and the motion transfers instantly. On a roadside loading site, a suspended excavator swings off balance mid-air. One sudden shift and the entire machine drops under its own weight. On a brush-clearing slope, a chainsaw digs into dense wood, then suddenly kicks straight back along its cutting path. Inside an industrial pit, welding introduces heat into a confined space. Seconds later, built-up gases ignite, releasing sparks and intense heat. At a tight loading gate, a forklift rolls backward off a truck. Then, without warning, the truck lurches forward as its balance shifts. Always immobilize the truck and confirm it cannot move before any loading or unloading begins. In a residential yard, a cut is made into a standing tree from an elevated position. Then the upper section suddenly breaks free and swings back into the work zone. Control the cut and predict the fall path. Never position yourself within the swing radius of the section being removed. On a drilling rig floor, a vertical rod near the well opening is handled. Then, without warning, it begins vibrating before dropping straight down. Maintain controlled handling and keep clear of unsecured vertical loads. Never rely on manual hold when mechanical forces are involved. On a roadside setup, a pole is lifted into position. Then the metal boom rises just enough to contact an overhead line, and a sudden arc flashes through the air. Control equipment height and maintain verified clearance from live overhead lines during lifting and erection work. On a fragile rooftop edge, a tree is cut section by section. Then the trunk shifts unexpectedly and drops straight downward under its own weight. Establish a clear drop zone and keep all personnel completely outside the fall path before making any cut. On a roadside work zone, materials are handled at height. Then, out of nowhere, a wheelbarrow drops from above into the area below. Secure tools and materials at height and maintain a protected exclusion zone below any elevated work area. Inside a small shop aisle, a refrigerator stands quietly against the wall. Then, in a split second, it tips forward and falls into the area in front of it. Large appliances must be stabilized and anchored, especially in high-traffic areas where movement or imbalance can trigger a tip-over. On a restaurant patio, an extension ladder leans against the wall. Then, midway through use, it shifts and suddenly loses support. Use stable, properly inspected ladders with secure footing and correct angle before climbing. A ladder relies on friction at the base and a stable contact point at the top. If the angle is too steep, the surface is unstable, or the ladder is compromised, the base can slip, causing immediate loss of support. On a sloped forest hillside, a tree begins to fall, but instead of the area being cleared, the trunk swings unpredictably as it descends. Plan the felling direction in advance and establish a fully cleared escape route at a 45-degree angle behind the cut line. All personnel must move out of the fall zone before the tree begins to commit, especially on sloped terrain where gravity can accelerate and redirect the trunk unexpectedly. Inside a construction bay, a suspended metal beam hangs mid-lift. Then, without warning, it drops suddenly into the work zone. Treat every suspended load as an active hazard zone. Establish clear exclusion boundaries, coordinate movements with the lifting operator, and keep all personnel outside the load path until it is fully secured and stable. Inside a deep trench, excavation continues from above. Then the trench wall suddenly gives way and collapses inward. Keep personnel out of the trench during active excavation and only allow entry when proper protective systems like trench boxes, shoring, or sloped walls are installed and the area is declared stable. At ground level above a deep shaft, the surface looks solid. Then, without warning, it turns to loose sand and drops straight downward under its own weight. Treat any ground above excavations or voids as unstable unless reinforced. Restrict access, use proper covers, and verify load-bearing capacity before stepping onto it. In a pipe yard, a bundled load is positioned for lifting. Then suddenly, an object drops from above as the crane operation begins. During lifting operations, maintain a controlled exclusion zone around both the suspended load and the overhead rigging path, ensuring no personnel remain beneath or near active lifting equipment. Behind a busy bar counter, movement continues across the work area. Then, in a split second, an unseen floor opening gives way beneath a step. Keep all floor openings clearly covered, marked, or guarded at all times, and maintain full awareness of walking paths in active work zones. On uneven ground, a powered saw cuts through wood. Then, in an instant, the tool suddenly kicks upward along its cutting path. Maintain stable footing, controlled cutting angles, and proper body positioning when operating cutting tools, especially on uneven terrain where balance and control can shift instantly. On a crowded night yard, a tanker sits among parked trucks during maintenance until a sudden flash ignites without warning. Never, ever perform hot work or allow ignition sources near a tanker unless the atmosphere is verified safe and fully controlled. Residual vapors can ignite without warning. Balanced on a ladder, a tree limb is cut. Then the section drops faster than expected and strikes the ladder below. Position ladders outside the projected fall line of cut sections and plan each cut so the falling mass has a clear, controlled path away from both the worker and the access equipment. Once the cut releases, gravity accelerates the branch downward along the path of least resistance. If the fall path intersects with the ladder, the impact transfers force into the structure, instantly destabilizing the support. If it's in the fall path, it becomes part of the hazard. Control where the load travels, or it will control the outcome. Along an industrial basin walkway, movement continues near an open concrete tank. Then suddenly, footing is lost and a drop occurs into the open pit below. Install continuous guardrails or secured covers over all open tanks. Designate clear walking paths with non-slip surfaces and enforce safe access zones so workers do not operate or pass close to exposed liquid pits. Additionally, require proper footwear, maintain dry surfaces, and ensure visibility of edges through markings or barriers to prevent accidental entry. On top of a tanker under overhead lines, work takes place on the metal surface. Then, in an instant, a flash ignites and flames spread rapidly across the tank. Control ignition sources and eliminate hazardous conditions before working on tank surfaces. Verify grounding, isolate electrical exposure, and assess for flammable vapors or static buildup before any task begins. Tanks can accumulate flammable vapors, and contact with electrical sources or static discharge can trigger ignition. Once ignited, the confined vapor space rapidly expands combustion across the surface. Energy and vapor don't need much to ignite. Control the environment, or it will react on its own. On a steep hillside cut, an excavator reaches out over the edge. Then the ground beneath its tracks suddenly breaks loose, and the machine is pulled down slope as the surface gives way. Before operating on slopes, evaluate soil type, moisture, and recent excavation impact, and establish a safe setback distance from the edge that accounts for potential ground failure. Avoid undercutting the base of the slope. Keep the machine oriented for stability, tracks perpendicular to the edge when possible, and continuously monitor for warning signs like cracking, shifting soil, or falling debris that indicate loss of ground integrity. Excavation removes lateral support, weakening the slope structure and reducing friction between soil layers. When the combined weight of the machine and loosened material exceeds the soil's shear strength, the slope fails, causing a rapid downward slide. Slopes don't fail gradually. They give way all at once. Read the ground early, or it will move without warning. In a tight backyard between two houses, a freshly cut tree begins to fall, then suddenly pivots mid-drop and strikes the side of the building. Tree felling in confined residential spaces demands precise directional control using proper notch and backcut techniques, combined with guide ropes or mechanical assistance to control the fall path. Before cutting, assess lean, weight distribution, and nearby structures. Establish a clear drop zone and ensure all workers are positioned outside the potential swing radius where the trunk can twist, split, or rebound unpredictably. Inside a warehouse, the side gate of a loaded truck is released. Within a split second, the stacked cargo surges outward and drops straight down. Side loading and unloading operations require strict load containment awareness. Materials inside transport vehicles must be secured, evenly stacked, and restrained before any gate or latch is released. Workers should always assume stored energy within the load. Stand clear of the discharge path. Open gates from a protected position and use mechanical aids or controlled release methods to prevent sudden load shifts caused by imbalance, vibration during transport, or gravity-driven pressure buildup against the barrier. During transport, vibration and movement shift the load's center of gravity, often pressing it tightly against the side gate. Once the restraint is removed, gravitational force and stored lateral pressure release instantly, causing the load to surge outward. A closed gate can be holding back more than just cargo. Release it blindly, and gravity takes over instantly. At the side of a gas tanker, a loose hose suddenly whips free, spraying vapor in all directions. Then, in a split second, the cloud ignites and flames spread rapidly. Pressurized transfer hoses must be fully secured, depressurized, and verified before disconnection or movement. Hose restraints, locking couplings, and shut-off valves are critical to prevent uncontrolled release, and operators must position themselves outside the potential whip radius while ensuring emergency isolation systems are ready, because once a hose under pressure breaks free, it becomes both a projectile and a source of rapidly expanding flammable vapor. Inside a partially built floor, a surface appears solid, then without warning, it gives way, and a sudden drop occurs through the opening below. Exposed floor framing and concealed openings must be clearly identified, fully covered with load-rated materials, or protected with guardrails before anyone is allowed to step into the area. Temporary covers must be secured against movement and capable of supporting weight, while access zones should be restricted and communicated so untrained individuals are never placed on incomplete or deceptive surfaces that appear stable but have no structural support beneath. A loose or unsupported board can shift under load, instantly removing support. Once capacity is exceeded, gravity drives a sudden drop through the opening. Not every surface that looks solid will hold. If it's not secured and rated, it's a hidden drop waiting to happen. In a busy auto workshop, a truck sits elevated high on a hydraulic lift. Then, without warning, the vehicle lowers unexpectedly from the lift. Working beneath the vehicle before confirming physical lock engagement is a sequencing error. The task feels complete, but the safeguard is still pending. Completion without verification creates false security, and in mechanical environments, assumption is often the final step before catastrophic failure. At the base of a large tree, the cut is nearly complete. Then suddenly, the lower section of the trunk bursts outward and kicks back with explosive force. Tree cutting at the base involves extreme stored energy within the trunk fibers, especially under compression and tension zones. Proper felling technique requires a correct notch and controlled back cut to guide energy release, while operators must position themselves outside the kickback zone, never directly behind or in line with the cut, maintaining a clear escape path at a 45-degree angle away from the fall direction, as splitting, barber chairing, or sudden trunk separation can violently eject sections of wood without warning. As the cut deepens, internal stresses build between compressed and stretched fibers. When these forces release unevenly, the trunk can split or snap, converting stored energy into sudden backward or upward motion. A tree doesn't just fall, it can strike back, stand in the wrong line, and the cut becomes the impact point. At the base of a large tree, the cut is nearly complete. Then suddenly, the lower section shifts outward and kicks back with sudden force. During lifting operations, suspended loads must never be manually stabilized by direct physical contact. Taglines or guide ropes should be used to control orientation from a safe distance, while workers must remain clear of the load path and never position themselves beneath or alongside an unstable lift. Rigging must be properly balanced, load weight and center of gravity assessed, and communication between the operator and ground crew maintained to prevent sudden shifts that can turn the load into a moving hazard. On top of the machine, access is made into an open section. Then suddenly, the system cycles again, and components re-engage without warning. Machines with automatic or cyclic motion must always be treated as live systems, even during brief pauses. Before any hand enters a working zone, full lockout/tagout and energy isolation must be applied because relying on a momentary stop or assumed inactivity exposes workers to sudden reactivation. Safeguards, interlocks, and proper shutdown procedures are essential to prevent unexpected cycling that can occur without warning. Automated machines operate on programmed cycles where stored energy and control systems can restart motion instantly. Without isolation, the system can re-engage, activating moving parts regardless of human presence. A stopped machine isn't always safe. It may just be waiting. If it can cycle, it can move without warning. Inside a deep excavation pit, an excavator operates near a vertical trench wall. Then, without warning, the soil face loses stability and collapses inward. Excavation walls without proper support or sloping can fail without warning, especially under vibration, moisture, or load from nearby equipment. When personnel are positioned directly beside unsupported trench faces, any sudden collapse turns the wall itself into a moving mass of soil with no escape time. At a milling machine cutting nylon, the material begins to chatter and shift. Then suddenly, it breaks loose and is expelled from the cutting zone. Machining soft plastics like nylon requires controlled clamping, correct tooling, and stable feed rates because the material can deform, loosen, or build internal stress during cutting. Workpieces must be firmly secured with appropriate fixtures, cutting speeds adjusted to prevent heat buildup and vibration, and operators positioned outside the direct line of ejection while using guards or shields. Because once the material loses grip under rotational force, it can be expelled at high speed without warning. Nylon can flex and expand under heat and cutting pressure, reducing clamping stability. Combined with rotational force from the tool, this can cause sudden release, converting stored stress into rapid outward motion. If the setup isn't secure, the machine will eject it, control the hold, or lose control of the motion. A kettle is placed on a table in a hurry. Then the moment it's released, it shifts and spills downward instantly. Placing containers with hot liquids demands deliberate positioning and stability checks, especially in tight or cluttered workspaces. The base must be fully supported, centered, and free from interference, with enough clearance around it to prevent contact or imbalance, because a rushed or partial placement can leave the container unstable, or minor shifts can tip the container and direct the contents downward into the surrounding area. On a timber loading platform, stacked logs are used to guide a load. Then suddenly, the entire surface begins to roll. Standing or working on unsecured round materials like logs introduces a constant instability risk because cylindrical loads are inherently mobile under pressure. Safe operations require workers to stay off stacked logs unless they are fully restrained using chocks, cradles, or side supports, and to maintain stable footing on fixed platforms while handling loads, since even a slight shift in weight, vibration from machinery, or uneven stacking can trigger sudden rolling and load displacement. Logs act like rollers due to their circular shape, reducing friction and allowing rotation under load. Once one log moves, it transfers motion to adjacent logs, causing a chain shift across the stack. Unstable ground doesn't give warnings. Control the load, or it controls you. High above the ground between two buildings, movement continues along a narrow crane boom. Then one slip breaks stability and sends motion outward into open air. Working at height on narrow structural elements like crane booms requires continuous fall protection, controlled positioning, and secure anchorage at all times. Workers must remain tied off with properly rated lifelines, maintain stable footing on designated walkways, and avoid transitioning or shifting positions without three-point stability, because any loss of balance on an elevated, unsupported beam immediately exposes the body to gravity with no secondary barrier to stop a fall. On a roadside loading zone, a narrow wooden ramp is used to move sacks into a truck. Then one misstep breaks stability, and motion shifts toward the live traffic lane. Using makeshift access like narrow wooden planks as ramps or stairs creates a high-risk transition point between ground and elevated loads, especially near active roadways. Safe operations require properly secured loading platforms with adequate width, anti-slip surfaces, and guard support where possible, along with traffic separation or barriers, because unstable footing combined with load handling and nearby vehicle movement significantly increases the chance of losing balance and being forced into hazardous zones. A narrow plank reduces the base of support, making balance highly sensitive to small shifts. When carrying a load, the center of mass moves higher and forward, increasing the likelihood of slipping off the edge. Unstable access turns routine work into exposure. Where you step controls where the motion goes. On an active drilling rig floor, access is made into a rotating assembly. Then the machine cycles and components close and re-engage in an instant. Working around drilling rigs and rotating equipment demands strict control of energy sources and safe positioning because these systems operate with high torque and unpredictable movement. Workers must stay clear of pinch points, rotating components, and moving assemblies. Use proper lockout or pause controls before entering work zones, and maintain clear communication with operators, since even a brief interaction with energized equipment can result in immediate entrapment when components rotate, shift, or close without warning. High on a partially cut tree beside residential rooftops, the final cut is made while positioned on the trunk. Then the section snaps and a swinging branch shifts suddenly through the path. Tree cutting at height requires controlled cutting sequences, secure positioning, and proper separation from the section being removed, because once a cut releases stored tension, the tree can move, swing, or rebound unpredictably. Workers must position themselves outside the path of movement, use harness systems and anchor points independent of the cut section, and anticipate how weight distribution and hinge wood will behave, since standing on or too close to the piece being cut exposes the body directly to the force and motion generated during release. When a tree section is cut, stored tension and gravity cause it to rotate or swing along its pivot. This sudden movement transfers force outward, striking anything in its path. Cutting releases more than wood, it releases force. Position outside the path or the motion takes over. Inside a compact kitchen, a gas burner is turned on as usual. Then in a split second, accumulated gas ignites and a rapid flash fills the space. Gas appliances must be operated with full awareness of potential accumulation and ignition risks, especially in enclosed spaces where leaked gas can build up undetected. Proper practice includes ensuring valves are fully closed before ignition, verifying there is no lingering gas smell, maintaining adequate ventilation, and igniting burners immediately and correctly to avoid delayed ignition, because any trapped gas-air mixture can ignite explosively the moment a flame or spark is introduced. At a roadside junction, a tractor pulls a loaded trailer into the lane. Then a fast-moving car suddenly enters the same path, and a collision occurs. Entering active roadways with slow-moving or heavy equipment requires full traffic awareness, clear visibility, and controlled entry timing, because these vehicles accelerate slowly and occupy more space, making them highly vulnerable during merging. Operators must ensure both directions are clear, use spotters where visibility is limited, and avoid entering when approaching vehicles are within unsafe distance, since the speed difference between road traffic and equipment leaves little time for correction once a vehicle commits to the lane. A fast-moving vehicle carries high momentum, and when it meets a slow, heavy object, the force transfer is sudden and difficult to absorb. Limited acceleration of the tractor reduces its ability to clear the path in time. Speed gaps close faster than they appear. The moment you enter decides what follows. In a small workshop, a spinning rod rotates at full speed. Then contact is made during motion, and the rotation instantly pulls material into its path. Rotating equipment stores continuous kinetic energy, and any contact point instantly becomes a grab point. Cleaning, adjusting, or wiping while motion is active allows friction to pull tools, cloth, or hands directly into the rotation path before reaction time can intervene. Proper isolation means stopping the machine completely, allowing all motion to cease, and ensuring no residual rotation or stored energy remains before approaching the hazard zone. Inside a busy industrial yard, movement crosses an open lane as a fully loaded forklift rolls forward with its view completely blocked. As an open lane as a fully loaded forklift rolls forward with its view completely blocked. When a forklift carries a high or bulky load, the operator's forward visibility can be severely restricted, turning the machine into a moving blind spot. Anyone entering that path becomes invisible to the driver. Safe operation requires clear travel paths, designated pedestrian zones, and procedures such as traveling in reverse when vision is obstructed, using spotters, or slowing to controlled speeds where visibility is limited. Without separation between people and moving equipment, the hazard is not just movement, it's unseen movement. A loaded forklift raises its center of mass and blocks line of sight, creating both visibility and control limitations. The machine continues moving with momentum, while the operator reacts based only on partial or delayed visual input. If the path isn't visible, the hazard is already active. Stay clear of moving equipment, especially when loads block the view. On a narrow roadside work zone, a cement truck suddenly begins rolling backward, its path opening into the active work area without warning. Heavy vehicles on uneven or sloped terrain can begin unintended movement if not properly secured, especially when braking systems are not engaged, wheels are not chocked, or ground conditions shift under load. A concrete mixer adds dynamic weight due to the rotating drum and shifting material, which can reduce stability and increase rollback force. Parking or positioning heavy equipment within a tree's fall zone creates a fixed hazard exposure, where the machine cannot be moved once the tree releases. Parking or positioning heavy equipment within a tree's fall zone creates a fixed hazard exposure, where the machine, and anyone near it, cannot react once the tree releases. During felling, the tree's weight, internal tension, and cut angle determine its path, but small variations can shift that direction suddenly. As the cut weakens the base, the tree's center of mass shifts and gravity accelerates the fall. Any imbalance or uneven resistance can redirect the trunk, causing it to rotate or drop toward nearby objects. Where you park matters before the cut even starts. Stay out of the fall zone, because once it moves, nothing can adjust in time. Inside a compact industrial workspace, the door of a large rotary furnace is opened. Then, in an instant, accumulated gases ignite and a rapid flame front expands outward. Industrial heating chambers and furnaces can accumulate unburned fuel gases or vapor when combustion is unstable or airflow is restricted, creating a volatile internal atmosphere. Opening the chamber introduces a sudden surge of oxygen, which can trigger rapid ignition of these trapped gases. Safe procedures require controlled shutdown, proper purging of the chamber, verification of internal conditions, and allowing sufficient time for any residual fuel to dissipate before opening access doors. In a wood shop, a tall piece of timber is guided over a spinning table saw. Then the board suddenly binds and kicks back, shooting straight along the blade's path. Table saws create a powerful kickback hazard when wood binds against the blade or fence, especially with tall or unstable pieces that are not properly supported. As the blade rotates at high speed, it can grab and eject the material with explosive force in the opposite direction of the cut. Safe operation requires proper stance out of the line of fire, using push tools or guides, ensuring the wood is flat and stable, and never feeding tall or awkward pieces without adequate support or control. The spinning blade transfers rotational energy into the wood when it binds, converting it into a sudden linear force. This launches the material backward at high speed along the blade's path. The blade doesn't just cut, it can throw. Stay out of the line and control the work before it controls you. In a wooded backyard, a branch is cut from a ladder, then the section swings back and strikes the ladder suddenly. Cutting branches while positioned on a ladder introduces multiple instability hazards, especially when the cut section is still under tension or partially supported by surrounding limbs. As the cut completes, the branch can swing, drop, or recoil unpredictably, transferring force directly into the ladder and surrounding structure. Safe practice requires securing the branch with rigging or controlled cuts, avoiding standing directly in the swing path, and using stable platforms instead of ladders when working at height with cutting tools. At the edge of a deep construction pit, a crawler crane lifts a machine from the excavation floor when the rigging suddenly fails, shifting the load and pulling the crane sharply toward the edge. Lifting operations must use properly rated rigging and controlled load positioning to prevent sudden force shifts during hoisting. In a yard beside a parked pickup truck, a large tree is cut. Then the trunk falls directly into the vehicle's position. Felling a tree without clearing the surrounding drop zone exposes nearby property and structures to direct impact when the trunk releases. The fall direction can be influenced by lean, internal stress, and cutting angle, but without proper planning or control measures, the tree can descend onto anything within its radius. Safe practice requires establishing a clear fall path, removing vehicles and obstacles from the impact zone, and using directional cuts or guide methods to manage where the tree will land. As the cut weakens the base, gravity pulls the tree toward its center of mass. Any natural lean or imbalance determines the final direction, causing the trunk to fall with significant force onto whatever lies below. A falling tree follows its own path, not your assumptions. Clear the zone before the cut begins. On a rooftop, an AC unit is open during maintenance. Then, without warning, a pressurized release discharges outward from the system. Air conditioning units contain pressurized refrigerant systems and electrical components that can become unstable if damaged, overheated, or improperly handled during servicing. Opening or working on these systems without isolating power, relieving pressure, and verifying system integrity can trigger sudden releases of energy. Safe practice requires full lockout of electrical supply, controlled depressurization, and proper diagnostic checks before any physical interaction with the unit. At a busy loading yard, a truck-mounted crane lowers sheet material into a truck bed. Then the load begins to swing and drop into the landing zone. Suspended loads are inherently unstable, especially when lifted by slings or straps that can shift, loosen, or lose balance mid-air. When personnel remain inside the drop zone, even a slight movement or sudden release can turn the load into an uncontrolled falling hazard. Safe lifting operations require a fully cleared landing area, controlled guidance from a distance, and strict exclusion zones beneath suspended loads. A suspended load stores gravitational potential energy that converts instantly into downward force when stability is lost. Any imbalance or sling shift causes rapid acceleration with no recovery time. If the drop zone isn't clear, the hazard is already active. Let gravity act on empty space. Control the zone before the lift. In a wooded work site, a ladder leans against a tree as a heavy branch is cut until the moment the section breaks and swings back along the cut path. When cutting elevated sections from a ladder, the tree's stored tension and the weight of the branch can redirect force unpredictably. A shifting or rebounding cut piece can transfer impact directly into the ladder, instantly removing stability and turning the work position into a falling hazard. Inside a tight storage room, a large ceramic liquor jar is shifted near the edge until its weight suddenly overpowers the balance and it tips forward. Heavy, rounded containers like ceramic jars become unstable when their center of gravity moves beyond their base. Once that tipping point is crossed, the mass accelerates forward, making it nearly impossible to stop or recover the load by hand. As the jar tilts, its center of mass shifts outside the support base, allowing gravity to create rotational force. That torque rapidly increases, turning a slow lean into an unstoppable fall. Once a heavy load starts tipping, strength won't save it. Control the position early, or the motion takes over. In an open training yard, a small contained fire burns in a metal tray, then a pressurized extinguisher discharges, rapidly spreading a dense white cloud around the flames. Fire extinguishers release pressurized agents that can rapidly expand and displace air around the fire zone. When applied too close or without control, the force of discharge can scatter burning material or obscure visibility, making the situation harder to manage in the moment. At a roadside entry point, a heavy sliding gate moves across the opening as a truck approaches, until an attempt is made to stop it by hand while it's already in motion. Manual force cannot counteract the momentum of a moving gate, especially when driven or guided by its own weight and track system. Once in motion, the structure carries enough force to trap anything in its path. turning pinch points into immediate hazard zones. The gate's mass and movement create momentum that continues unless externally stopped by a stronger force. Human strength is negligible compared to that moving mass, leading to trapping forces at contact points. If it's moving, don't fight it. Clear it. Hands don't stop mass, distance does. On a residential street, a large tree is cut at the base as the trunk begins to fall. Then the direction suddenly shifts as the weight pulls it off its intended path. Tree felling is controlled by balance, cut angle, and internal tension within the wood. When these forces are misjudged or uneven, the trunk can rotate, twist, or redirect mid-fall, shifting its path into unintended zones. Inside a busy auto shop, a car is lifted as movement approaches the wheel area, then suddenly pauses after a hidden hazard is noticed near the tire. Ground-level work areas can conceal hazards that remain unnoticed until close proximity. When workers move into tight spaces without scanning first, they can unknowingly step into environments where hidden risks are already present. Objects at floor level often fall outside the immediate field of view, especially during task-focused movement. Hazard detection is delayed until distance closes and visual attention shifts downward. Danger doesn't always move. You walk into it. Pause, scan, then step in. In a wooded clearing, a ladder is set against a tree as a heavy branch is cut. When it breaks loose, the section swings sharply back along the cut path. When cutting branches from an elevated position, the falling section doesn't always drop cleanly away. Its weight and pivot point can redirect force back toward the trunk, turning the cut